Hello 5-1 Orange Group, Mr. Waterman here with today's language arts lesson on Friday, January 28th, 2022. I hope you all have had a great week and you and your family are doing safe and well, and you have had a very productive week of studying online. Okay, so for the first part of our two-lesson block, we are going to focus on our grammar lesson. We have been comparing with more and most this week, and we had activities on pages 149 and 150, which you started on Wednesday. Hopefully you completed these activities with no problem. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go over the answers from these two pages, and then I will go into reading the directions because you have a test today. The test is over, of course, comparing with more and most. It is on pages 151 and 152. Okay, so let's get started. On Wednesday, we went over 2 points. We learned never add ER and more to the same adjective. And we also learned to never add EST and most to the same adjective. Now, we saw this in a few of the examples that we read through the other day, okay? For the directions, we needed to read the sentences. If the sentence was correct, you just had to write correct on the line. If it was not correct, then you had to rewrite the sentence using the correct form of the adjective, okay? So we did numbers 1 and 3 together. Let's go through and check number 2 and then numbers 4 through 8. 2. This story is the most interestingest that I have ever read. Interestingest is not correct. It should be this story is the most interesting that I have ever read. And so remember, when you're using most, the hint is a phrase such as have ever, of all, in the world. Okay? Let's look at number 4. The most dangerousest time was the day that the enemy shot at grandfather. We know that dangerousest is not a word. It should be the most dangerous time was the day that the enemy shot at grandfather. Okay, there we go. Now looking at number 5. It was more fascinating to watch the stars than to go to school. Fascinating is not correct. It should be it was more fascinating to watch the stars than to go to school. I think many of you would agree, right? Wouldn't you like watching the stars more than going to school? I don't know. I think some of you would like going to school more than watching the stars, right? So, our clue to using more is the word than. When you see the word than, you know you are comparing two people, two places, and two things. Okay, let's have a look at number 6. John wanted to learn to write more difficult codes. Is there anything wrong with this sentence? More difficult? No, that's correct. So we write correct. Okay. Number 7. The Navajo language was considered more secreter than other languages. Secreter is incorrect. It should be the Navajo language was considered more secret than other languages. Okay, we are comparing two things. Finally, from number 8, a wild horse feels more comfortable without a rope around its neck. Comfortable is not correct. A wild horse feels more comfortable without a rope around its neck. I can understand that. Poor horse. Nothing should have to have a rope around its neck. Okay, and here are your answers for the activity on page 149. When you're finished checking everything, turn the page and let's finish checking the proofreading activity on 150. Okay. So, we needed to read the paragraph, identify the errors in the use of more and most with adjectives, okay? And then we had to rewrite the paragraph correcting any mistakes. So we did the first couple of sentences. Let's continue. So we are up to some. Some of the most difficultest codes change the order of the letters and words. Okay? Difficultest is wrong. Some of the most difficult codes change the order of the letters in words. Okay? Other codes use an uncommon language. There's nothing wrong here, so we can just simply copy this sentence. Okay? That'll make it nice and easy for us. Before we move on to the next sentence, an example of this type is the Navajo code used during World War II. That's also okay. So, an example of this type is the Navajo code used during World War II. It was one of the best choices because few people know Navajo. Best is wrong. Should be best. I read the correction. So it was one of the best choices because few people know Navajo. Okay. No matter how hard the Japanese tried, they could not break this code. There's no mistakes in this sentence. So we'll just copy it. Okay. They could not break this code. Okay, almost done. Hang in there. This is the last sentence. Navajo code was one of the most importantest weapons for the United States during World War II. Most importantest. Importantest is wrong. Navajo code was one of the most important weapons for the United States during World War II. Okay, there we have it. We've corrected the paragraph. Good job. When you're done checking, please turn to page 151. And now let's look at the directions for today's test. Comparing with more and most. The directions say, circle the letter beside the correct form of the adjective. Okay, I'm going to say, circle the letter beside the correct form of adjective and write the adjective in the blank. You're going to get 2 points each, okay? So this page will be out of 16 points. Please listen as I read each one. Number 1, that language was the A, most secret weapon of all. B, that language was the most secretest weapon of all. More secretest. C, that language was the most secretest weapon of all. 2, the blank words stood for letters. A, the more commoner words stood for letters. B, the most commonest words stood for letters. C, the most common words stood for letters. 3, code talkers fought in the blank battles. A, code talkers fought in the most terriblest battles. B, code talkers fought in the most terrible battles. C, code talkers fought in the more terribler battles. 4, the canyon was the blank place that he had ever been. A. The canyon was the most thrilling place that he had ever been. B. The canyon was the most thrillingest place that he had ever been. C. The canyon was the more thrillinger place that he had ever been. 5. Her grandmother's advice was the blank of all. A. Her grandmother's advice was the more wise of all. B. Her grandmother's advice was the wisest of all. C. Her grandmother's advice was the more wisest of all. 6. The island was blank than before. A. The island was more beautiful than before. B. The island was beautifuler than before. C. The island was beautifulest than before. 7. Hundreds of the blank messages were passed. A. Hundreds of the more vitaler messages were passed. B. Hundreds of the most vitalist messages were passed. C. Hundreds of the most vital messages were passed. 8. It was the blank code ever used. A. It was the more brillianter code ever used. B. It was the most brilliant code ever used. C. It was the more brilliant code ever used. Okay, so be sure that you're circling the letter and writing the adjective in the blank. When you're finished, turn to page 152. It's the second part of your test. So, please remember these points. Point 1, in general, for adjectives of 3 or more syllables, use more and most to compare people, places, and things. Point 2, use more to compare 2 people, 2 places, or 2 things. Point 3, use most to compare more than 2. Point 4, never add er and more to the same adjective. Never add est and most to the same adjective. For the directions, forget work with a partner, forget one of you, the other. We're going to cross all that out. We're going to just skip 2. Look for the proper forms of more and most with adjectives. Take out more and most if they are not needed. Rewrite the sentences correctly. Please listen as I read each sentence. 1. The Navajo Code was more complicated than others. 2. It was the most rapidest way to send messages. 3. These horses are more bigger than most others. 4. The war was the terriblest in history. 5. Going away was the more frightening event of all. 6. It was more difficult for grandfather to speak English than Navajo. 7. The hills were the most beautifulest he'd ever seen. 8. John's grandfather was one of the most adventurous people in the world. Okay? There are 8 sentences. These are going to be 2 points each. 1 for circling mistakes, 2 for writing the sentence correctly. This page is out of 16 points. So today's total test will be out of 32 points. And that's it. Take your time, students. Remember, before starting the test, go back and read all of the points that we've had in this activity. Okay? If you have any questions, you can email Mr. Waterman at any time. Please take care, stay safe, be well, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye for now.